Hey guys, this is Nick, aka Crazy Cookie on the Poker VIP forums. Coming at you today with a new Poker VIP coaching video with my fourth and final episode of How I Crush with PokerSnowie. In this series, we've been looking back at some of the changes that PokerSnowie have introduced recently, some of the updates, as well as looking at some of the ways that we can use it to really improve our game, find our own leaks, practice new opening ranges, practice new styles of play, and really get into the poker flow. And today we're going to be looking at how we can use PokerSnowie to improve our understanding of range balancing. This is an area that I used a lot when again, after I had a bit of a break from poker, I came back, and this was an area that I used to really improve how I played post flop, and how I balanced my betting and checking ranges, in position, out of position. And I think it's something that certainly those who are looking at playing 20NL, 50NL and above, obviously, is something that I think is really important to add to your game. So far I've kind of touched on how with PokerSnowie, a lot of the advice it gives we've got to take with a grain of salt, because if we're playing against the massive fish, we want to be exploiting them. But obviously, the higher stakes you go, not only do the players get better, but normally the fish get slightly better, and quite often there are less fish. So it means that we have to therefore play a more balanced range in most spots, and it becomes ever more important to understand how to balance our ranges. And that is what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to be looking at how Snowie balances its range, and how it will use certain hands to bet, certain hands to check. And then I'm going to talk about how we can use it to not only understand Snowie's thought process, because I think it's important to do so, but also how we can then improve our own thought process at the tables. So let's get straight into it. We have up here PokerSnowie. You will have seen this if you've watched the last few videos. If you want to know more about PokerSnowie, check out video 1 of this series. It goes through sort of like very quickly what it does. And today we're going to be using the scenarios tab here. And like I said in the last video, we're going to look at a hand that I played against Snowie, which was very interesting that Snowie decided to check it on the river. And I was interested to see which hand it's checking and which hand it's betting on the river. So the way you add scenarios is you just add players. We'll put it at 50 cent a dollar, because that's what we were playing, and it'll be slightly easier because it'll be in terms of big blinds. Player 2 in this instance was where the hero was, and player 3 was villain. Cool. So we had okay, let's first of all put the hands in. That might be a little bit easier. And we had the ace of spades and the king of diamonds. So we can put these in here, down here, the card selection. Ace of spades, king of diamonds. The action was folded to us. And we can now, very quickly down here, see PokerSnowie's suggestions. So we can see the evaluation, our hand strength, and the analysis tool. And we're going to be going into that a little bit more post-flop, because I don't think we need to look too much at the small blind opening range. All we need to know is that I did open for pot. I raised to 3, and the big blind called. The flop, which you can then choose from down here, came 4 of diamonds, 10 of spades, 6 of spades. And in game, I'm just going to double check the hand history. I believe I bet half pot. I'm just going to double check though. Let's have a look. So the pot was 6 on the flop, which it is. And I bet half pot. So I bet half pot, which is the option we choose. Snowie is suggesting that we should be checking some of the time and we should be betting some of the time. And as we saw, the EV is the same. And the reason this is because some people will get it confused. They'll say, well, if betting's the same EV as checking, then surely we should bet, because we've got fold equity, blah blah blah. What we can look at here is we can see the ranges that PokerSnowie is checking and betting. So we can see that in his checking range, when he has 3 of a kind, he's going to be checking. Let's have a check. Let's double check all this. Suggested action, that's it. So you go down here, you can see PokerSnowie's range here that opened pot pre-flop. This is entire range, and we can see the suggested action, and we can see that with our sets, so 10s, 6s, and 4s, we're betting half pot the majority of the time. It's not too big of a surprise. It's a wet board. It's a board that we're going to be c-betting with quite a lot of our draws, so therefore we want to be c-betting with our strong hands as well. We can see that we're also going to be betting a lot of the time when we have two pair, 10-6. And the way Snowy does it is that a few 10-6 suited combos he checks, and a few 10-6 suited combos, a few 10-6 suited combos he will check a little bit more often. Obviously, we're not quite at that computer level where we can just say, well, I'm going to check this hand 25% of the time and be sure of it. But this is getting an idea of how Snowy begins balancing his range. And as we go down here, we can begin to see the hands that we're going to be c-betting with and checking with, and where we've got a mixed strategy. If we go down to ace-king off, so we've got down here ace-king off, and we can see that Snowy is suggesting that with all of our ace-king off combos, when we don't have the ace of spades, so that's the first one we're going to look at, we're going to be betting 79% of the time. And when we do have the ace of spades, we're actually going to be checking more often. And that's how Snowy is deciding to balance its ace-king range. I suppose when we have the ace of spades, there's more. We can see actually that when we have the ace of spades, a lot of the time we have a mixed strategy. And that's just going to be because we want to be check raising this hand sometime, I'd assume. And we can actually do it. We can see if we check and villain bets half pot, what is Snowy's suggestion? Snowy's suggestion to call. And we can see with the analysis tool again, we can view ranges when it comes up. And we can see that we're actually raising a very, very small percentage of the time. We're raising sets when we've checked them, which is only 10s, a very small percentage of the time. 10-6 when we've checked them, 10-4 when we've checked, we're going to raise some of the time. But we can see a lot of the time we're check calling. And the reason that Snowy is able to check call with ace-king here, with two overcards, a couple of backdoors, is because we're also check calling a lot of 10x, a lot of other draws. So effectively, we can see that our check calling range is fairly protected with those top pair, second pair. I'd imagine some pocket pairs will be in here as well if we scroll up. Maybe not, maybe they're all bets. But we can see that a lot of our check calling range is going to be, it's fairly protected by one pair combos. So a hand like ace-king can fit into that quite well. If we go back to hero checks, we're actually going to now have to restart the scenario. So just bear with me 1 second. Okay, so back to this, the original scenario where hero decides to bet half pot and villain calls. The river comes a queen of hearts. And we can see that Snowy is suggesting that we should be continuing to bet. We now have two overcards and a gut shot. So it's a pretty good barreling spot. We are checking this some of the time. We can go through and, like I said in play, if you like, betting pot was actually a higher EV. And the reason that we should be, or the reason Snowy is suggesting that we should be betting this half pot is because I'd imagine that when we look at the ranges, the action when we bet, the only time we're betting half pot. So although the EV of betting ace-king off here is going to be highest when we bet pot, the EV of betting a lot of our other hands is going to be worse, and therefore, so that we don't, whenever we bet pot, have a big hand, we make sure we bet everything half pot. This is an area where, when we're playing against fish, or even against a lot of regs up until 100 nil, 200 nil, and probably even higher, to be honest, we don't have to worry too much about balancing ace-king here with the rest of our range, because we want to make the most, the highest EV play. And it's very unlikely that players at 100 nil, 200 nil, and to be honest, for the moment, even above that, are going to be picking up on the fact that in this exact spot, we will only bet pot with, sets and ace-king, and when we bet half pot, we've got a fairly capped range. just because we're going to come into this situation, this exact situation, not that often. And our opponent would have to have a lot of hands on us and be able to very clearly say that a pot size bet on the turn in this kind of situation gives us quite a strong range, and a half pot bet sizing gives us a very capped range. It's very unlikely, possibly, that anybody right now is really doing that. When you play super high stakes and you have a lot of player analysis and players will have thousands and thousands of hands each other, it becomes a little bit more of an issue. And that's why I elected to bet pot in game. But it is important to realize that for us to be completely balanced, we should be saying that if we're betting half pot with our more capped range, we should be betting half pot with our bigger hands and our bigger draws. So we can see that a hand like pocket tens that we've bet the flop with, we are going to be betting it half pot. Pocket sixes are going to be betting it half pot when we bet. We have got a mixed strategy with those, which would be check raising, I suppose. All of our two pairs, so queen six, queen 10, which we may not have bet 100% on the flop, but when we have bet them, they're going to be betting half pot. And it also means that we can bet our 10x hands for value for half pot. So there's a lot of reasons why we bet half pot on the turn when we have, a slightly weaker value range. So our ace 10, our king 10, hand like pocket jacks is probably in here somewhere. So we want to be betting those half pot, and to do that we've also bet our sets half pot, and to do that we want to be betting our draws half pot as well. All kind of it makes sense, despite the fact that a hand like pocket tens probably has a higher EV to bet pot on the turn here. To balance it, Snowy has suggested that we bet half pot. We can change the sizing, and we can see that when we bet pot, we are betting a few less hands. Half pot, we're betting 85%. Pot, we're betting 82%. If we bet quarter pot, we're betting 84%. So we can see, and if we bet 2x pot, we're betting a lot less. So we can see that by betting half pot, we're actually betting more often. So we're more aggressive when we bet half pot. But it's not a huge difference. So in these kind of spots, I would probably elect to have a slightly mixed strategy. And this is how I made massive improvements in my game, and how you can make improvements in your game. You can say, in these kind of spots, I'm going to split my strategy, and I'm going to put my strongest draws, some of my nutted combos, so pocket tens here. My strong draws, so like king jack of spades, which now has a flush draw and a straight draw. My nut flush draws, which also have a gut shot, along with pocket tens and pocket queens as a pot size bet. And then my slightly weaker draws, and my slightly worse sets, fours and sixes, and my top pair combos, and some weak two pair combos as half pot. And then you can kind of balance it like that, which I think works very well at micro stakes and small stakes, because you extract maximum value when you've got a big hand, but you still have a balanced strategy when you bet slightly smaller. So that's how I begin approaching these spots. Snowy is suggesting just to bet half pot of all of them. In game, we decided to bet pot, and we got called. And the river was then really interesting. It was, let me just get it up, the Jack of Hearts. And, I was joking around in the commentary saying that Snowy obviously knew that we were going to make a straight, and that's why betting pot was a higher EV. And I was quite surprised to see that Snowy was suggesting to check. Again, we had the situation where betting pot or betting, all in was a higher EV. But Snowy was suggesting that we're going to be betting quarter pot. And the reason for this is, when we look at Snowy's betting range here, a lot of the time we now have, a lot of strong hands like queen six, over pairs and sets. But because they're not as nutted now, and we may want to get raised some of the time here by weak flush draws, I believe that's why Snowy's putting in the quarter size pot bet. So by including ace king, and I'd imagine a hand like jack, 8 9 9 king in this kind of range to bet quite small, is extracting maximum value off of now still quite a tough board. If our opponent's got a 10, they're probably going to have to call, or Snowy does anyway. If they have a hand like jack 9, then they're going to call. If they have a weak queen, somehow they're going to call. So Snowy here is just saying that a lot of our hands now are a lot of villain's range is unlikely to call. We'll plug in a sec if we bet quarter pot, and we can see what villain's actually calling with. But a lot of villain's range is now quite weak. They've got a misdraw, they've got second or third pair. They might have some weaker two pairs and not top two. So a hand like Jack 10, which is second and third pair. They might have a hand like Ace Queen some of the time, and they're gonna so they've got quite a weak range here. So therefore, when we have a value bet, we want to be betting quite small. And this is something that I think is really important to add to your game. If you begin realizing that a board runs out in a way that your opponent can't really have that good of a hand to call, and we've got a monster, it's normally a better option to bet quite small and to get them to call, rather than, betting huge and to hope that they make a hero call with Ace 10 or something like that. It is interesting then when we get into the dynamics of what hands do we bluff on the river. And looking through Snowy's betting range, I'm not sure how many bluffs he actually has here. He's using a lot of, there aren't very many, to be honest. I don't see any in here which are bluffs. So it is interesting to see that Snowy isn't actually bluffing this river that much. And again, that's another reason for making it so small. If we don't have any bluffs in our range, then we might as well just look to get called by everything. So the two things to take away from this kind of spot is, one, think about what kind of range our opponent has. Do they have only top pair hands that are going to call? Do they have some weak two pairs that are going to call when we make a monster? And if they have a particularly weak range and we have a value bet, we want to go quite small. And if we don't have very many bluffs, we want to go quite small, because when we don't have any bluffs, we effectively want to be called the whole time. Now, that's obviously a balanced strategy, and in game we might begin to say that, okay, we're going to bet small when we have our hands like Queen 10, pocket pair sets, Jack Queen, maybe 8-9, we're going to bet small. But when we have a hand like Ace King, maybe King 9, we're actually going to bet a bit bigger, just because we have the nuts and we want to just sort of prey on the fact that a lot of players call down a little bit too light. So that's possibly how I would do it in game. I think I ended up betting quite big, but I'm interested to see when we check what happens. So I'm going to put in that we check, and we're now going to look at villain's range for betting. And we can see that villain is actually betting most of the time. When he bets, he's betting pot, which is really interesting to see. And it means that a hand like Ace King will do a lot better to just call, just check, because a lot of what villain now bets, pot, will be a worse hand than us. So we've got hands like worst straights are obviously betting pot. Top two pair are betting pot. Second two pair are betting pot. Some weaker two pair are, sorry, did I say second top pair? I think I said second two pair. So all the two pair combos are betting pot. Even some just top pair combos are betting pot. And then some of the misdraws as well. So Snowy's kind of like said here that we're going to be betting pot. We've got a lot of value hands, but I'm not sure if they get called by worse. I'm not sure, for example, that King Queen gets called by worse on the river when they bets pot, because he just has top pair and a blocker to the straight draw. I can't see myself, check calling with Ace Jack or King Jack here when he bets pot. So that may well be some strange bluff that he's just sort of like including in his range. I don't think so. It's a bit of an odd one. But we can see now that checking Ace King here is obviously great when villain is going to be betting pot nearly half the time. So it's interesting to see that. Obviously, if villain bets pot, I don't think we're going to have anything other than a shove. And when we do raise all in, I'm interested to see what villain calls with. Let's have a look. We can see that, well, he's actually calling quite a bit, only with straights, and actually with a hand like Queen Jack and Queen 10. So when he has top pair and another pair, he's actually calling off, which is interesting, because I'm not sure when the small blind shoves how many bluffs we have here. Let's have a look. It's actually suggesting not to raise all in all that often. Okay. When we raise all in here, we have Ace King, King 9, 8 9, some sets, and some, oh, interesting. So we've got some hands like ace 4, without the ace of spades as bluffs, and king 5. So we do have some bluffs in our check shoving range, which makes sense. I don't expect they'll be doing it all that often, as we can see here. They're only check shoving 5% of the time, king 2, king 5, king 3 suited, and a hand like 8-5 suited, which, you know, turns more of draws, I believe. Is that right? Maybe not. It just has a gotcha on the flop. So some of the bluffs we are check shoving, according to Snowy. I would say that, you know, against a perfect opponent, this would be fine, I suppose, because we've just seen that villain's value betting a bit too thin with a pot size bet. There are obviously ways that we can then just say, well, if you're betting too thin, we're going to value bet small with our medium strength hands to try and get called, and we're going to check shove our, you know, sets and straights, and you're possibly going to call us down a bit too light. So yeah, I'm just going to check how long this video has been going on for, and we still have a little bit of time. So this is how you can kind of go through these. You can begin to understand how Snowy balances its range and get an understanding of how we can improve our own balancing range. I'm going to pull out a hand that I saw on the forum the other day. This is a hand from SOS A-Time 96 or SOSATime 96. Don't know how you pronounce that. We're going to use his hand, where we have pocket kings from the cutoff. So we're going to start up a new scenario. I'll put it to 50 NL because that was the stakes he was playing at the time. Probably would have made it a little bit easier if I made the button in the right place. Player 6 is going to be hero, and the small blind is going to be villain. The action goes, what's it go? Fold, fold. And then we raise with King of Diamonds and the King of Hearts to 1.5. Let's see. 1.5. We raise to 1.5. We get a fold from, oh no, we're in the wrong position. Let's, oh well, imagine we're in the cutoff here. Or imagine that, you know, so sat time open from mid position. The small blind calls and the big blind folds. The flop comes 4 queen 5 of hearts. Villain checks, and we elect to bet. It looks like just over half pot. So we bet about that. It's 2 actually, and we get check raise to 7.5, 7.75. We'll go to 8.26 because that's how Snow's doing it. So first of all, it's interesting to see if Snow's suggesting that we should bet the flop. Snow's suggesting that we should check here. That we should, if we do bet, we should bet smaller. I do like how Snowy's introduces bet sizing, and I think that to balance on this kind of board texture, I'd imagine that we're going to see quite a lot of sort of like top pair and draws betting this size, and we do see that we're betting quite a lot of the time. With a lot of nutted hands. We've got all of our flushes there, over pairs, sets, top pair with a draw, all of our other kind of draws. So the reason we're betting so small here is because we've got a lot of hands that are betting and a lot of hands which have quite a lot of equity as well. So therefore, we're kind of like saying, well, when we bet, we've got a strong hand or strong draw, so we want to get a call. So Snow is suggesting that this sizing's a little bit wrong, that we should be checking. Villain then raises. We'll see which hands villain is raising. And in this exact scenario, actually, Snow is suggesting that he doesn't have a check raising range. And this is where Snowy can be a little bit, have some limitations because it doesn't have a check raising range. But either way, when we do get check raised, we're going to see that Snow is suggesting to just call, that we're going to be calling when we have a flush, when we have three of a kind, so when we have our sets, and when we have some nut flush draws, or a hand like pocket kings. Yeah, interesting. Is kings even here? Kings would be a check. That's why on the flop. So when we have aces with the ace of hearts, then it's a call. So kings with the king of hearts should be a call as well, I suppose. So we do call. The turn is then a blank. It's a 7 of clubs. No, there, please. Thank you. So the turn is a 7 of clubs, and villain checks. Now, I'd imagine that Snowy is suggesting here we should be betting all of the time. It's interesting that I'm proved completely wrong, and Snowy's suggesting that we should be checking. Let's see which hands we are betting. I'm imagining that we're going to be betting our flushes here, which we are, and our top set and our top pair nut flush draw, and some of our nut flush draws. So that's when we bet. And when we check, it's our one pair. It's some of our one pair with a flush draw. We're checking that a lot of the time. And we're checking sometimes when we have top set. And we're checking some of our nut flush draws. And we're checking some of the time when we have top pair. So quite a mixed strategy as often. So I guess here Snowy's saying that this is virtually the same hand as aces here. And therefore we should be checking. I would say, like, if I was to analyze this hand, I would say we probably should just bet the turn, because I don't see why someone would check raise the flop with a flush and then check the turn. It kind of just it seems like they were bluffing the flop, and we can then induce them to do something silly with a small bet on the turn, or that they have a hand like, you know, ace queen and want to stack off on the flop, and are now saying, okay, I'm going to check because I was expecting to go all in on the flop or for you to fold. Most of the time when someone check raises and they check the turn, I tend to see them turn up with a bluff. Just because most people, if you check raise and you improve or you have a big hand, you want to bet the turn. But we do check, which is what Snowy suggests. And then on the river, we actually get bet into 40. The pot's about 20, and villain bets. We'll put 16. We'll put in 15 for now. It's slightly less than 14, but the pot we've made slightly bigger. So villain bets 15, and Snowy is suggesting that there's a 6 of diamonds on the river. Sorry, 6 of diamonds on the river. Snowy is suggesting here that we should be folding most of the time. That if we call with this some of the time, the EV of our call is going to be fine. In game, like I would say, if I was playing this hand, I mean, yeah, villain can just turn up with an 8 here. I'm not sure how. I mean, like maybe pocket 8s with the 8 of hearts, something like that. Generally here, I would say that, again, I just see so many bluffs here that I'm just going to call and expect to see something a bit odd. It's interesting to see which hands Snowy is going to be calling with. And we can see that we are calling quite a lot of the time. When we call, we've got top set, aces with the ace of hearts, which we're calling some of the time, top pair with a nut flush draw blocker. So we can see that by the river we've actually got to quite a narrow range, but we're still calling quite a lot, which I always think in these situations, if you can create your own ranges on the river and you're in a tough spot with a hand like pocket kings here, and you say, well, okay, in my range here, I actually have, top set. I have a hand like ace 8 with the ace of hearts that has made a straight. I have some weak flushes that maybe you decide to check with on the river. If you can be in a situation where you can say, I'm calling this river 50, 60% of the time like Snowy is, then folding kings is not an issue, because if our opponent is over bluffing, well, they're still going to run into a call too often. And that's, I think, a great way to, again, set up your ranges to be unexploitable, to just be in a situation where you can say, well, on this river, I've got a tough spot with kings, but because of the way I play some of my weaker flush draws, some of the ways I play some of my sets, on the river I actually get to a situation where I've got a lot of hands that are calling. So if villain is over bluffing, well, he's making a bad play. In the actual hand example, I'm not too surprised to see villain turn up with just something completely random and show it, because why wouldn't you show a sick bluff, right? So yeah, have a play around with Snowy. Use the range advice. Not necessarily to see, you can use it, like I said, to see how Snowy plays and to get a better idea of how Snowy works, which I think is valuable, so that you can learn how to beat Snowy if you want to. But to be honest, I would say use it as a way to really improve your mindset in terms of, okay, what am I betting here? What am I checking? And how does that create a strategy where I can't really be exploited? How does that put me in a situation where if my opponent's over bluffing here, he's kind of screwed. And if he's under bluffing here, then it doesn't really make a difference. Or, in a lot of situations, I make it so that, okay, well, because I've got a lot of, for example, a lot of sets in my range when I bet in certain situations, I can put in a lot of draws. And if my opponent makes too many calls, expects me to be bluffing too much, then I'm kind of doing fine because I've got all of my sets, all of my value hands in my betting range. So I can put those bluffs in. I see a lot of people get in situations where they want to slow play some of their sets, but they want to bluff a lot. And you get into situations where people don't realize it, but they may be on the river or wherever it is. And you say, you're bluffing so much here and you're slow playing all of your nutted hands. If your opponent calls you down, you're making a huge error. And certainly, 5-0 through to probably 100-0, to be honest, from what I've seen, you get called down more than people making hero folds. People make hero calls rather than hero folds. So you want to go more the other way and make sure you have all of your sets, all of your two pair in your betting range. Not in all, every example, but you want to go more that way more often. So it's an interesting way to think about how to be unexploitable, and also to think about our opponent's range and be like, well, if he doesn't have any strong hands here, do I want to be betting this big? So yeah, I hope that all made sense. If you have any questions, post them below and we'll try to answer them. Look out for the deal with PokerSnowie on Poker VIP. There'll be links, I'm sure, underneath this video, either to the site or to the deal. And yeah, this has been Nick for Poker VIP. Hope you've enjoyed this series. If you are looking to get Snowy and need any questions, just send me a message on the forums and I can help you out. And yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video series.